I was on the shore grooming the mules when a strange object came walking down the canal carrying a fiddle under its arm and went on board the boat. The visitor had a dabbled calico dress with skirts hanging straight down, which was more noticeable as hoops were then in the height of fashion. Tommy was aboard and entertained the visitor, but I kept an eye on the object. After talking with Tommy a while, the visitor played him a tune or two and went on his way. I afterward learned the person's history. It seems that when the visitor was born, it was a serious question whether the visitor should be called Abby or John. But it was finally decided to call them Abby, and by that name the visitor was christened, and the mistake was not found out until it was too late. But from the time the child could speak, it protested by word and action, and now, grown to full stature, the visitor was a veritable vagabond traveling around the village with fiddle, palm leaf hat, whiskers, and a heavy bass voice, and dressed in petticoats. After we carried the little boat down below the lock, I got a strip of edging from the sawmill to splice out the pointer for a tow line, for there was only a paddle made from a bit of board to row with. I towed them a piece, then Tommy took my place, and I sat in the bow and had the grandest panorama of water snakes I ever saw. Before this, I'd never even seen a snake in or around the canal, although Captain had warned me to look out for copperheads among the brush. It seems that the snakes were along the edge of the canal, hid by the low shrubs and water plants, and the pole that we used to tow the boat dragged through these and stirred them up, and they started for the other side of the canal and went wiggling across about 4 feet in front of the boat and about 5 feet apart, giving an average of 1,000 snakes to the mile. A mule would not walk over a poisonous snake. They would stop at about 8 to 10 feet, and their ears would go down. And the towboy had to carry a pole all the time to kill the slithery ones. At night, the boat was hauled up to the shore and made fast, the mules unguarded, and the feed trough brought out. This was about 1 yard long and large enough to hold 2 buckets of corn in the ear, and had but 2 legs, so it was tied to a fence. The first question asked a boatman is, "How do you live on board?" We had a small cook stove in which we burned the soft coal with which the boat was loaded, a spider, an iron tea kettle, plates, knives, forks, and several of the small cooking utensils, including a molasses jug. The bread was purchased at the warehouses along the canal and at the village grocery stores. Ham and bread was the standby. It was bread, dried bread and molasses, and bread. Ham, fried ham, and ham that made up the usual variety. By bringing the slices of ham to a boil in 1 or 2 changes of water, removed much of the salt and smoke and made it much more palatable and tender. Potatoes, when we had them, were boiled in the tea kettle. Then the coffee was made and the dishwater heated, all in the same utensil. I did most of the cooking, but I shall not brag of any fancy dishes. Fleas are very lively animals, and more often felt than seen. Whenever I felt one of the fleas walking along the bare skin, giving a bite now and then, I would put on the tea kettle, and when it began to boil, I would quietly roll the little fellow up in my shirt, take it off, and put it in the pail and pour the boiling water over it. It was a slow but sure method of catching them.